SABC News.
And in our sports headlines this hour, former Marumo Gallants coach Abdisalam Wadu has revealed the club could not afford to pay the salary promised to him. And the 2025 Comrades Marathon has been increased by 10% across the board. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
It is a very good afternoon to you, Kenya. Good afternoon, Eritrea, Somalia, Tanzania. Good afternoon to you, Côte d'Ivoire, Egypt, Eswatini. Good afternoon to you, Namibia. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Thami Ngubeni. This is where you get the African perspective. It's where we meet to look at the latest in news, business and sport. We are broadcasting live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa. We are on DSTV Audio Bouquet channel 802, on OpenView on channel 628, and you can also live stream us on www.channelafrica.co.za. You can also watch us on the SABC Plus app, which is available on the Google and Apple Play stores. You can also watch us additionally on our YouTube channel at Channel Africa 1. You'll find us at that very same address on Instagram and X. On Facebook, we are at Channel Africa. It's gone exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
We begin here this afternoon with Greenpeace Africa. They've demanded that global soft drinks maker Coca-Cola stop the usage of plastic on World Environment Day. The environment advocacy group demonstrated outside Coca-Cola's offices in Johannesburg, South Africa, with a high-impact visual demonstration exposing one of the world's most recognizable brands and its contribution to global pollution. Thami Ngubeni has that story.
In its memorandum of demands to the global soft drinks maker, Greenpeace Africa has called on Coca-Cola to stop using plastic. The environment advocacy group demonstrated outside Coca-Cola's offices in Johannesburg, South Africa, to mark World Environment Day. This was through a high-impact visual demonstration exposing the brand as a contributor to global pollution. The creative activity aligns with the UN's 2025 World Environment Day focus on ending plastic pollution. Helen Dana, project lead Pan-African Plastics Project at Greenpeace Africa, says Coca-Cola has been named as the world's top most polluter for 6 years running from 2018 to 2023.
So today on World Environment Day, we are outside Coca-Cola's corporate office in Johannesburg, and the reason why we're here is because Coca-Cola has been named as the world's top most polluter for 6 years running from 2018 to 2023, and Coca-Cola produces 120 billion throwaway plastics every year, and these plastics will end up in the environment, in the marine ecosystem, and having not just environmental impact but also impacts on our ill health.
Dana says Coca-Cola must stop using plastic but to rather invest in refill and reuse models as negotiations for the use of plastic continue.
So we are telling Coca-Cola to cap plastic production and to invest in refill and reuse models, things like the glass bottles, the cans that we used to have before. And secondly, we are telling Coca-Cola to be a strong advocate of the Global Plastic Treaty, that is the negotiations that are ongoing. Coca-Cola is part of the business coalition, and so we want them to use their influential position to actually influence, but also advocate strongly for the Global Global Plastic Treaty. And this treaty, when agreed, will enable us to curb plastic production.
The Plastic Treaty is an international effort aimed at addressing plastic pollution through a legally binding agreement. In March 2022, the historic resolution was adopted at the UN Environment Assembly to develop this treaty, focusing on the entire life cycle of plastics from design to disposal. Dana says they're hoping they will return with a strong treaty after the meeting in Geneva, Switzerland later this year.
We are at the final stages of the negotiation, and we will be having the second round of the fifth meeting, that is INC 5.2 in Geneva in August. And we hope that by the time we leave Geneva, we will be coming back home with a strong treaty. The member states failed to agree last year in Busan because there were a few articles, one of them being production, that were very contentious. A number of the member states want to look at downstream measures, especially the big oil producers. They do not want to touch anything on production. But you see, we cannot have a waste management treaty. We need a treaty that will look at, capping plastic production. And as Greenpeace Africa, we are calling for at least a 75%, reduction in plastic production by the year 2040. And we want Coca-Cola to be part of that, one of the, corporates really strongly advocating for this.
Dana has made a heartfelt plea to corporates not to prioritize profits before people, especially as those marginalized, mostly in Africa, are impacted by this plastic pollution.
So corporates are putting profits before people and the planet, but they need to go beyond that, because this is not just for our environment. This is about the health of human beings, of ourselves, but also of future generations. So we are urging corporates to go beyond, business interests, to go beyond profits and look at the impacts, the long-term impacts of plastics, because plastic has been shown to have disproportionately, impacts on marginalized community. Most of this community lives in, global South, Africa being part of that.
The action concluded with activists attempting to deliver their demands directly to Coca-Cola's senior management, who failed to come outside, while the activists left a trophy for world's #1 polluter on Coca-Cola's doorstep. For Channel Africa News, I am Thami Ngubeni in Johannesburg.
I'm Thami Ngubeni, anchor of Africa in Business on Channel Africa, bringing you the African perspective.
And I'm Ashok Ganda, host of the National Pulse on SAFM, leading the conversations.
We've to bring you in-depth, exclusive G20 developments as we count down to the much-awaited inaugural G20 Summit in South Africa, November 2025.
Tune in every Thursday at 16:20 Central African Time as we explore how this first G20 in Africa impacts the continent, from trade and innovation to climate and development.
It's a powerful crossover between Channel Africa and SAFM
as we bring you the G20 through an African lens.
The G20 in Africa.
Global Summit.
African Voice.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
It is exactly 15 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. Now, starting from next week, which is the 12th of June 2025, Channel Africa and SAFM will be collaborating to bring you the latest discussions on G20, and this is building up to the November summit. But before we do that, here's an open invitation for you to join us on the various social media platforms. On X, you'll find us at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook at Channel Africa, Instagram at Channel Africa 1, and YouTube at Channel Africa 1. I'm quite interested to find out from you the fact that this is the very first G20 that is going to be hosted on the African continent. Of what significance is that to you as an African? Does it align with your priorities? Do you believe that it being hosted in South Africa on African soil is going to have a tangible impact on your community, on your environment, on your food economy, on inclusive growth, on equality? Let us know. You'll find us on all our various social media platforms. As I mentioned, starting next week on the 12th of June 2025, at 4:20 p.m. Channel Africa and SAFM will be collaborating to be bringing you the latest discussions on G20. And this is all as a big build-up to the November summit. Joining me on the line is Ashraf Garda, the host of the National Pulse on SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. Ashraf, a very good afternoon to you. So good to be chatting to you once again.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I should tell you or tell the nation a bit of a secret. When I normally, I mean, your times have changed now, but for a good 10 months, when I get to studios to the SAFM, the first person I meet at the SABC leaving studios is yourself. So in a strange way, we collaborate just by saying how's it to each other, and we do it on the air now anyway.
And I tell you what, Ashraf, I couldn't have been more delighted that this is happening. I have for the longest time had wanted and longed for an opportunity to actually co-host with you as industry colleagues. We've worked alongside each other but never together. So I'm really excited about the next few months that come ahead as we focus on what really is a first for Africa and what many nations on the continent hope will be a pivotal time for the continent.
Absolutely, and I think what's important for us, right, is, you do what you do, I do what I do in our normal world, but we connected not just in media, but we connected both of us by the responsibility of having a voice, and a voice that resonates nationwide. And I mean, that voice and that responsibility is multiplied in a G20 year.
When President Cyril Ramaphosa took over the presidency of the G20, he said that this is Africa's G20. Yes, it may be held on South African soil, but it's being held on the African continent, and it belongs to the continent and should serve the interests of the continent. How important is not only South African media, but I'd say African media in disseminating information on the G20 to all the African countries and all the African states so that it really does feel like an African G20?
Well, I think, it's an interesting question. I think, first of all, not even the media, how important is it for South Africa and the impact that it has on the continent in terms of what we do. Now, I used the example of the 2010 World Cup as an example of that. So what we do for Africa then, or rather for South Africa then, is, Kinako, it's time for Africa, right, at that time. So in the same way, what we do for the G20 as South Africa, because the other countries are not members of the G20, and they certainly don't chair it like we do, it must have a resonance to the entire African continent. So we don't just do it for ourselves, but we do see ourselves as a catalyst for increasing growth for the entire continent. So once we agree on that part, the second part is actually easier. That you and I and other people in the media space must amplify just that connection of alignment between what is good for South Africa must be good for Africa, and what is good for Africa must be good for South Africa.
And we have, over the past few months, been focusing on some of the meetings that have been taking place around the G20 in preparation for the November 22-23 summit. Various task forces focusing on inclusive economic growth, on the reduction of inequality, the food economy, artificial intelligence, sustainable development. Which of these different streams, Ashraf, do you believe that South Africa or Africa is perhaps lagging behind on the most?
Well, it's interesting, and I've often repeated this, that when I've had chats with others on brand SA forums, what's come through from other industry leaders is like South Africa doesn't realize that its greatest USP, its unique selling point or proposition is its innovation, its level of innovation amongst the youth. And I don't think South Africa as a country truly gets it, right? So other people see it, and that, I think, must come through in our ability to innovate and to play that innovation space in many factors. I mean, you mentioned artificial intelligence, but I can think about everything else. How can our creativity and innovative thinking, or can I call it even champion thinking, that means thinking about being champions and therefore developing our mindset to be best in class, how can that then permeate the different categories of that makes up G20 and for the benefit of South Africa and the continent? That really must be the biggest challenge, and they must do so, and we must do so.
And I must agree with you on that, Ashraf, because if you look at artificial intelligence and you even look at technology and innovation, and considering the fact that we are a continent with one of the youngest people, so really we should be plugging in there. And once technology and innovation is centerfold in everything that we do, that then impacts the other sectors. It impacts agriculture and the food economy. It influences inequality. It influences economic growth. So if we do focus on that, I think really that would stand us in a very good stead.
Well, absolutely. Must agree with you. Can't say more than that. You spot on.
Well, we've got a whole lot more that we can say over the next few weeks as Ashraf Garda and myself join hands as we focus on the G20 summit, which will be taking place in South Africa, the first on African soil from the November 22nd to the 23rd. So, Ashraf, looking forward to this time next week once again as we start our dual podcast or dual simulcast of Africa in Business as well as the National Pulse on SAFM.
Absolutely, and you got your wish. We're going to collaborate and work together, even if we're not seated next to each other. We are taking advantage of the innovative innovation available in our world, where we can do one show effectively from two different platforms all at the same time. Now, that's really what we want.
And that's what we're all about. We are all about innovation. That's Ashraf Garda, the host of the National Pulse on SAFM, leading the conversation that moves us. It's exactly 4:22 Central African time. In just a moment, we continue with our focus on the G20. It is exactly 22 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Still on the agenda for today on Africa in Business, a man that really needs no introduction because he has been a captain in several industries. If you talk about telecoms, he is the former group CEO of First Rand. In Telkom, he led the largest telecommunications company's Telkom in South Africa. He retired in 2015. But as you will know, with high achievers and men and women of impact, retiring just means changing job descriptions. And that's exactly what he's done. And in the course of doing that, he's earned himself a doctorate as well. And really focusing on the next generation, young people, and how can they be impacted and given a really firm educational foundation that they're able to become the leaders of today and tomorrow. If you want to know who that is, maybe I should let you know, not keep you in suspense. He is none other than Sizwe Nxasana. He is our guest this afternoon on the C-Suite. It's 23 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we turn our focus once again on the G20. Now, South Africa's G20 presidency in 2025 does present a pivotal opportunity to shape global economic discourse while addressing pressing domestic and regional challenges. These are challenges such as transport, logistics networks. The G20's infrastructure, transport and logistics agenda focuses on addressing infrastructure gaps and improving connectivity, and this is particularly in developing countries. In South Africa, to be more specific, this is done through Operation Vulindlela. What is that? It is a joint initiative between the Presidency and National Treasury that aims to modernize and transform network industries, including electricity, water, transport and digital communications. To help unpack the G20 infrastructure, transport and logistics agenda, we joined on the line by Mielani Mkabela, the Director and Chief Economist of Answisa Management Group. Good to have you with us and welcome to Africa in Business.
Thanks, and listeners of Channel Africa.
Good to have you with us. Perhaps let's start with why infrastructure, transport and logistics are so central in global economic development today.
Practically, you find that domestic, regional and global trade is a backdrop of the global economy. So without transport connectivity, we can't speak about trade, because like when you look at the continent, moving trade amongst like intra or like intra continental trade or intra trade in the African continent, it needs like let's say road connectivity of almost about all the 54 centers or all the 54 capital centers in the continent, and that is only on the road. And then you look on rail, you will really as well need within countries. There is mining, there is agriculture, and critical infrastructure in mining, agriculture, and manufacturing needs rail transportation, because that is a strategic infrastructure that is expected for investors to use when they are producing. And in the same layer, you look at meetings and cargo aviation having a critical element in moving some of the products that needs to be moved quicker, mainly like fresh produce that has to be moving around because they are perishables, and then you need to move them in different quarters of the country. In the morning when they are harvested, in the afternoon they must be in the other side and then packaged, and then they are in the counters. So you need connectivity within the continent, and then you need connectivity, internationally, where you can look at continent to continent, Africa and European Union, Africa and Asia, Africa and North America, and then you look at Africa and Britain. All that needs to be done well so that we are able to move the tomatoes, the citrus, the grapes, and the other products that we are producing in South Africa and in other parts of African markets here.
When we look at the state of infrastructure on the African continent, a lot of it, and the majority of it, dates back to colonial or early post-independent eras. So we're talking here 1950s, 60s, 70s. So a lot of it actually hasn't been adequately upgraded over the decades. And reports have it that 80% of roads in sub-Saharan Africa are currently still unpaved. Could you talk to us about the common challenges that G20 countries are facing in upgrading aging transport infrastructure? But maybe let's focus on the African continent as a start.
Yeah, so like on the Africa Development Bank and World Bank report, since 2012, it has been highlighting the infrastructure finance gap of around $100 billion in Africa. That is your 2010, 2012, up until 2015. And from 2016, we then had a report that started to speak about an Africa infrastructure gap of 120, and we sit at around $140 billion infrastructure gap now. And the challenge that Africa Development Bank has been having for the past 10 years is in 2014 they could only raise $44 billion in the 100 billion, and then when you look at 2016 to 2018, they could raise around 65 to 70 billion. And you find that the backlog of 55 billion that was, accumulating in every year was not really recalculated. And you find that like we have a backlog which is only on the past 14 years. We have a backlog that is half of what we have been managing to get as capital invested in the continent with regard to infrastructure. And that is the biggest limitation for quality infrastructure delivery, because for quality infrastructure delivery, you need enough investment in infrastructure that will cover integrated infrastructure, looking at commercial transport. It could look at which in that we look at your transport, mobility, and ports and terminals. And then you look at telecoms, because you can't operate ports without telecoms. And then you will need as well energy, because you can't operate transportation in ports and terminals, without and aviation, without energy and telecom. So from that, it makes us to look at the challenges that it is a triple challenge for infrastructure, which transport infrastructure is impacted as well indirectly by telecoms investment and by energy investment.
One of the things that you've highlighted is the lack of integration amongst logistic partners, as well as the appreciation for information technology. And you've highlighted that as one of the key issues that hinder effective supply chain management. So how can G20 economies work together to improve cross-border transport and logistics?
I think the main responsibility of South Africa as a key player as part of the 20 global countries, or like the 20 group of countries of the world, it is to just bring awareness to that and to shape South Africa and other African markets in terms of project preparation and doing business in Africa, and make sure that we present not only South Africa, because developing South Africa only is not going to help South Africa. We need to develop the continent so that South Africa can benefit at the corridors of SADC, at the corridors of like West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, and Central Africa. And in that, the biggest beneficiary of all those is South Africa. Secondly, South Africa needs to as well start investing in African countries, because if we want to be a global big brother, we can't really just be ascending big podiums and then we are not preparing the African continent. Because if you look at 70% of young people that are in productivity labor, if we don't prepare for that, when they reach 33 years and without getting a job, you already know that they have been pushed into poverty. They are not gonna really manage to accumulate enough. So we really need to use this G20 and make sure that we showcase South Africa and the African continent, practically with regard to investments.
Mr. Mielani Mkabela, we thank you very much for your insight as we focus on the importance of infrastructure development in the global economic development in the backdrop of the G20. We thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, and the listeners.
Thank you. That's Mr. Mielani Mkabela, the Director and Chief Economist at Answisa Management Group. He takes us to exactly 4:33 Central African Time. Let's head over now to the markets desk, where Thabiso Lehoko is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Thami, and good afternoon. In South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 Rand 82. Botswana, 13.29 Namibia, 17 Namibian dollars 82, and in Zambia, it's at 26.30 to the dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 552. Ethiopia, 135 birr 93. Uganda, 3,000 shilling 621, and in Tanzania, the dollar will cost you 2,000 shilling 681. In Nigeria, the dollar is trading at 1,000 naira 579. Egypt, 49 Egyptian pound 633. Tunisia, 2 dinar 956, and in Algeria it is trading at 130 dinar 934. The Moroccan dirham is at 944 to the US dollar. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza. The Congolese franc, 2,850 to the US dollar. Commodities markets, gold $3,339. Platinum is at $1,126 per ounce. Brent crude oil, $65.08 a barrel. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Thabiso Lehoko with your financial indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Manchester City squad for the FIFA Club World Cup. The 29-year-old's future at Etihad Stadium is unclear.
And standing by with your latest from the business of sport, here is Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami, and good afternoon. We begin with what's happening at the weekend. It is the champion, Gerda won the women's race at the 2024 Comrades Marathon, breaking the previous record with a time of 5 hours, 49.46 seconds, and is looking to breaking it more again this weekend. She has now won 3 Comrades Marathon titles and also holds the record for the down run, which she set in 2023. The race was held on the 9th of June 2024 from Durban to Pietermaritzburg. But Gerda, who won the women's up run at the 2024 Comrades Marathon, took home over $112,000 in prize money and bonuses. The 2025 Comrades Marathon has been increased by 10% across the board, meaning that the winner in both the men and women's races will take home a cool $49,000, which will include a top-up. Steyn has a strong sponsorship with Thirsty and a sports drink brand. She's also a member of the Hollywood Athletics Club, a sports club sponsored by the Hollywood Birds. Additionally, she has had significant earnings from prize money, including record bonuses and hotspot prizes at the Comrades Marathon, which will happen at the weekend. Former Marumo Gallants coach Abdesalam Wadu has revealed the club could not afford to pay the salary promised to him after he managed to save their Betway Premiership status last month. The perplexing situation between Marumo Gallants and former coach Wadu continues to unfold, marked by conflicting claims of contract breach and denials. The initial agreement between the Moroccan-French coach and the Bloemfontein-based club was a 2-year deal, along with a promised salary increment if the coach successfully saved the club from relegation. Wadu explains.
I had an appointment in Johannesburg with my chairman, and I learned that he cannot be able next season to pay the salary that we have negotiated when I came in March, because the target was to save the club. If we save the club, we go for 2 years contract. And we had already negotiated everything. But when somebody call you in the meeting and tell you that we cannot afford to pay you next season, there is two choice. One choice, you said, okay, we stop here. But the second choice is if you like the club, if you love the people, if you love the players, maybe you try to find solutions.
Wadu fulfilled his end of the bargain by keeping the club in the Betway Premiership. However, the club understandably offered him less than half of the promised salary, citing severe financial constraints. Wadu and the Gallants owners had long agreed on new terms from the 1st of July, only for Gallants to reduce the offer and insist on a $56,000 release clause. Wadu sheds more light.
So I told him, okay, maybe let's offer me, give me another offer. So he gave me another offer, and he put some clause that I didn't like, not fair clause. I told him, please, you should take off this clause because it's not fair. And he told me that he will change this clause. And I was running behind him during 3 days. He was not answering to my calls.
Let's end with rugby. The Rugby Barbarians are a invitational club and a reunion club with a unique approach to funding. Their costs are primarily covered by the gate receipts from the matches they play, meaning the revenue from ticket sales helps to cover expenses like player fees, travel accommodation and stadium rentals. Essentially, the club relies on the success of individual events to finance its operation. The Boks will face the famous black and white of the Barbarians for the first time in South Africa with the Qatar Airways Cup on the line on the 28th of June. The Barbarians are primarily funded by the revenue generated from the matches. The cost of assembling a squad for each game or tour are covered by the gates received. While it's understood that certain teams and players like New Zealand and South Africa, and notably All Blacks, may command higher fees, the Barbarians generally cover these expenses through their match revenue. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 4:41 Central African time. Now, this is that time of the week that I certainly look very much forward to. This is when we host leaders, change agents, captains of industry. And this afternoon is no exception. Mr. Sizwe Nxasana's career began in corporate South Africa, where he led one of the region's largest telecommunications companies, Telkom. In 2005, he joined First Rand Banking Group as CEO. He served there until his retirement in 2015. Nxasana then co-founded Sfiso Learning Group in order to provide dynamic, engaging and directly relevant education. And on the 30th of May, he successfully defended his doctoral thesis, Navigating Teacher Learning in a Context of Implementing Project-Based Learning in South African K-12 Education, thus doing and thus cementing his role as a champion for educational reforms. To talk to us more about the doctorate, about his illustrious career in corporate and the move to education, we're joined by the man himself, Dr. Sizwe Nxasana, co-founder and CEO of Sfiso Learning Group. So good to have you with us, Doctor. You know, I say Dr. Nxasana, but to be honest with you, it feels like you've been a doctor for a very long time, Dr. Sizwe.
Well, you know, I have 5 honorary doctorates, and sometimes people call you, you know, doctor, which are often refused to be called doctor unless I'm in those institutions that gave me honorary doctorate. So, yes, yeah.
So now you can be a doctor all round. It doesn't matter the institution.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you.
I was saying a bit earlier on when I was talking to my colleagues and I was telling them about the conversation that we're about to have, that with high achievers, whether it's male or female, when they talk about retirement, it's not really retirement. It's really about changing hats. It's really about shifting gears, because you seem to have continued running just as fast as you were running while you were in corporate. Tell us why.
Well, for me, for starters, there's no word called retirement in my personal dictionary. It just doesn't exist. As long as I'm healthy and I can continue to work. South Africa, is a place with so many opportunities, and every problem that we have in the country is a challenge that is waiting for someone to solve. So, yeah, that's why for me, a life of service, a life of purpose, a life of now, making it better for young people is really what it's all about.
And what is it that facilitated that move, Dr. Nxasana, from corporate leadership to the education sector?
Well, I think we need to go back a little bit, because in my younger years as a chartered accountant, as a young chartered accountant, when I started what is now S&G Grant Thornton, which is the 5th largest firm in South Africa. I was also involved in education then. I was a lecturer, actually, in my 20s, a lecturer in accounting, auditing, and taxation. So, the wheel has come full circle, actually. But, when I look at where we are as a country in education, obviously education is a societal issue. Everybody has a stake in it, and everybody has a view in it. And for me, it's about trying to solve those problems that we talk about in the country all the time. So I want to be part of the solution. So I got involved in education. In fact, I never left education, to be very honest, because even when I was in corporate, as an example, when I was at Sizwe and Saluba Kobodo, the S&G Grant Thornton now, I was involved in Abasa. I was one of the presidents of Abasa for a couple of years. And we were going out to schools to teach young people about careers, about accounting and what's important, particularly issues like the importance of mathematics, as an example. And when I joined Telkom, I was the chair of the Telkom Foundation, which was the first time that the CEO of that particular company was chairing the foundation. I redirected that foundation towards education.
And was that my apologies, Doctor, was that a personal choice on your side to say, yes, I'm CEO, but I also want to run the foundation?
Absolutely, yeah. And it was the same at First Rand. So as the CEO of the First Rand Banking Group, I was also the chair of both the First Rand Empowerment Foundation and the First Rand Foundation. And the same thing happened there. Those foundations were doing a lot of other things, but I felt it was important for them to focus their attention on education. So I actually never left education. I'm now a practitioner as well as an academic now, because I really think in this chapter of my life, it is important to make that contribution in education very, very directly, because we have a number of challenges.
And we'll talk about those challenges in just a moment, Doctor. But I'm quite intrigued, and I wonder, the senior roles that you've held in corporate, how do they impact your educational style? How have they perhaps impacted the how of your teaching?
Well, in a number of ways, because whether I was in accounting and auditing or in telecoms or banking, there's always an issue in South Africa about everybody complaining about the quality of education that we give our young people and the mismatch that we have as a country between what the country needs, particularly in terms of the economy, but just generally, what skills and competencies do we need versus what is produced by the education system. And there's a huge mismatch. We talk about the high levels of unemployment in the country or inequality in the country. My own view is that the root cause of all of that can be traced back to education. What are we teaching? From preschool all the way up to post-school, in other words, community colleges, Tibet colleges, and universities.
Your doctoral thesis, titled Navigating Teacher Learning in a Context of Implementing Project-Based Learning in South Africa's K-12 Education, what informed that? Why did you choose that as a particular topic and subject? And what were your key learnings as you were doing your research and writing your thesis?
So there is no education system which can be better quality than the quality of its teachers. It's just not possible. We talk about technology or artificial intelligence and so on. You cannot replace teachers in the classroom. And that's why my own focus is on teachers, because there are many different elements in education. There's curriculum, there's obviously students, there's infrastructure, and so on. And we know many, many stories of schools that may even have poor infrastructure, but through great teachers are able to produce young people who go on to realize their full potential in life. So that's why my focus was particularly on how do we prepare our teachers for a fast-changing world that is impacted by technology, where they're able to not just impart knowledge or encourage the acquisition of knowledge of learners, but they're able to also acquire the skills and competencies themselves, which are important to impart to young people, because it's very difficult as a teacher to impart something that you don't have. So these days, we require young people who can solve problems, who can think critically, who can collaborate with others, who can be entrepreneurs, who can be, problem solvers and innovators. And that actually requires that teachers have those skills to allow young people to do that. So that's why when you look at my thesis, it is about what we've been doing at Future Nation schools, which are the schools that I started 8 years or 9 years ago now, understanding where those teachers come from, because a lot of them come from very traditional learning and teaching environments, in fact, all of them. And then, transforming those teachers to become teachers who have those skills and competencies that allow young people to fully realize their potential.
Doctor, in the advent and development of artificial intelligence and technology, young people now have access to a whole lot more information than they had before. And in many instances, one could argue that there are some areas that perhaps they're even more adept at than their very teachers themselves. How then can teachers be capacitated in order to deal with the really different evolving, perhaps even more challenging teaching and learning environment.
Yeah, that is why at our schools, and we're now working with government in a number of provinces to introduce problem-based learning or project-based learning, because what that does is it allows teachers to learn with students or with learners. You talk about artificial intelligence. Of course, artificial intelligence has changed or is changing the way learning and teaching takes place in the classroom. But what is important is to actually allow teachers to, one, acquire the skills in technology so that they're not only helping learners or students to become digital citizens in a responsible way, because there are a lot of irresponsible things that young people can do using artificial intelligence as an example. So just teaching young people what is going on when it comes to technology is important, and they, in the process, learn with the young people, because as you correctly say, very often young people may be a lot more adept in acquiring these skills. So it's creating teachers with a mindset of continuous learning. That is why, for me, I mean, the fact that at my age, I'm able to go to university and acquire these skills, hopefully acts as an indication that, lifelong learning is something that all of us can do. And therefore, talking about technology, teachers are mediators of learning, right? So in the context of technology, in the context of unemployment, in the context of all the challenges that we face, we need to encourage young people and direct them in the right way. Because even with AI, I mean, if you don't know how to prompt correctly, if you don't know how to distinguish between fake things or information and the reality, you're going to really lead young people, down the wrong path.
And
so that's why.
No, and I was saying there, Doctor, just agreeing with what you're saying, what you put in is what you'll get out. And if you don't have the skills to prompt accurately, then you're not really going to get the full usage and full benefit of whatever artificial intelligence or software system that you're using. But we're going to have to leave it at that for this afternoon, Dr. Sizwe.
When I started the schools, we started the schools. We started an education technology company. So we train our young people on different coding languages. It may be Python, it may be Java, it may be C# or whatever. So we teach young people, where does AI come from? How do they create a lot of things themselves using artificial intelligence? It may be machine learning, it may be using and developing solutions for large language models and so on. It is important for our young people not just to be consumers of artificial intelligence or technology generally, but to be creators.
And is this all part of this FISO learning group? Is that all part of this FISO learning group?
Yes, absolutely. So our education technology company is called CIFISO EdTech, Education Technology, and that's what we do. And we're able to integrate a lot of technologies in our classrooms, train teachers how to use them so that they can also impart those skills and competencies to young people.
Dr. Sizwe Nxasana, always a pleasure speaking with you, sir. And I dare say every time you and I have conversations, there's always something new, because you're always doing something different, always innovating, you and Dr. Judy as well. We thank you very much for your time and wish you continued success.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's Dr. Sizwe Nxasana, co-founder and CEO of FISO Learning Group. You'll also remember that he was chairperson of the National Students Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS, in South Africa, working really closely with institutions of higher learning and students. It's gone exactly 4:54 Central African time. Let's head over now to Lesotho, where the Ministry of Trade and Industry in the Kingdom of Lesotho is conducting a nationwide awareness campaign on its recently revived Insolvency Act of 2022. Now, it says that this act aims to provide for an efficient rescue and discovery of financially distressed companies as well as individuals in a manner that balances the rights and interests of all stakeholders. Rapelang Khatebe has more.
Many businesses and individuals find themselves in distress and often not fully informed of alternative rescue measures or procedures to follow should they need to wind down operations. The Ministry of Trade says seeking professional help early balances interests of all stakeholders involved.
This is a process where we encourage a company that is in a financial distress, that is probably still viable, that there's an alternative to liquidation, as it has always been a well-known process that once there's a mountain of debts for a company, then the winding up process will lead into liquidation, which oftentimes leads to a huge loss for the company and also the creditors that may be involved and any other person who has interest on the company.
The Solvency Act applies to both companies and individuals facing challenging times.
We are guarding the interest of the directors and shareholders of a company. We are guarding the interest of the employees of a company. We are guarding the interest of the creditors as well. So we're saying, instead of opting for a quick, well-known process of liquidation, why not we sit down and try to rescue the business?
Mahabane says, as the ministry, their main interest is to see businesses avoiding the insolvency route, as it has proven harder to recover from. She says they are committed to assist both corporates and individuals in distress with necessary tools and technical expertise that can ultimately save them from insolvency. I'm Rapelang Khatebe for SABC News, Masego Lesotho.
And that's how we come to the end of the Thursday edition of Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Thank you to our team, producer Mabo Buloka, technical producer Didimalo Macau, and social media Nzako Mashaba. I'm Thami Ngubeni. Until we meet again tomorrow, over now to the French desk. Give yourself a blessed evening further. Goodbye.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628.
Vue d'Afrique, un magazine des actualités en français sur Channel Africa. Rendez-vous du lundi au vendredi avec Joël Mouteba sur Channel Africa de 15h à 16h, temps universel. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Bonjour à tous et merci de vous connecter sur notre site internet www.channelafrica.co.za pour suivre Vue d'Afrique, le magazine d'actualité africaine en langue française.